So I was typing something out and I fucked up the editing because I was talking at my phone. I want to point out another tactic that our masters are using to dumb people down and condition them to quite literally leave a fucking emoji online, a social engineering sticker, and or to abbreviate words or to skip words. I be good and dumb fucking shit like that. Poor way to put it, I understand. To get my point across. When you jump into bullshit YouTube, this is me clicking on the little box down here. I've got a bar of emojis. If those weren't there, I could see more of what I'm typing. This is the same paragraph, roughly enough. I can't extend this. I can shuffle through it. But this is hard as fuck to scroll through and edit, is what I'm trying to say. Pardon me, I just got going. That's my excuse. I'm also being lazy and trying to multitask and blah, 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 blah. Either way, you should be able to see the entire fucking thing when you edit it. That's the point. So I dropped it into a text so I could read the fucking thing, edit the fucking thing, and post it in here. But that's not how these things work anymore because you and I have been had. We are being manipulated. We are being trained. And most people don't see this for what it is. And this is a problem. Let's try this again and see if it's still there. Good. I clicked that little bullshit thing just to make sure it didn't disappear. The reason I was talking about Wandering Stars is based on the topmost comment, which was left 9 months ago. The planet is fine. The people are fucked. George Carlin, another fucking Zionist puppet. Keep in mind, I like some of the things George Carlin said, but he never said anything that was thought-provoking, anything that was relevant, anything that you could use as a tool, anything that you were not supposed to know. So, I don't know. I already recorded part of this, then I started again. This isn't the dumbest thing that I've seen today, but it's the most ridiculous that I've seen so far. And you might be familiar with some of these assholes. British comedians is what I should say. And of course, controlled opposition, Elon Musk. Keep in mind, they're all Zionist puppets. They all work for the same fucking assholes who do not have our best interest in mind. I'm talking about yours and mine. I'm talking about the people. I'm talking about what should by all rights be for the people, by the people, across the fucking board. Grassroots, mom and pop, coming from the heart, doing the right fucking thing, having a moral compass, and being willing to stand up for what fucking matters. You have all these kids in America, in the States that talk about being a patriot and being this, that, and the other thing, and team fucking America, but they don't have a clue what's going on. And they're truly not willing to stand up for the right fucking thing because they too, typically speaking, don't have a fucking moral compass. Instead, this is me jumping off on a tangent real fast, you'll hear them squabble about skin color or religion or one of these superficial fucking topics that is a goddamn waste of time and proves that they have no clue what's going on. No clue what's fucking going on. They also, better point, they have no priorities. In other words, who they're quote-unquote targeting. I think of the Proud Boys, those fucking Muppets, who I think were put in place. I could be wrong about this, and I'm jumping off on another tangent. Bear with me. I feel like the Proud Boys were purposely pitted, at least the core group of them, and I don't know this for a fact, but the alphabet community is funded and was funded at its core by the Rockefeller Trust, and it comes from dastardly fucking origins. Most likely the Proud Boys are much in the same. I just fucking hate the Proud Boys, so I've never looked into that one enough. But then you get the Hegelian dialectic, us against them or them against us and blah, 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 and then you get people buying into a football game. Call me crazy, but I'm pretty sure that's why that is what it is and blah, blah, blah. Either way, most people who consider themselves patriots and shit like that, they assume that America is free. They assume it's, by all rights for the people, by the people, but they think that's democracy, which is a shade of fascism. In other words, people just don't have a fucking clue what's going on. America is a crown colony. It's the bottom of the trilateral city-states. The Republic fell during the Civil War and was finalized in 1871. That's when the Organic Act created the District of Columbia, and that turned America into a corporation in all capital fucking letters. And that means the military-industrial complex is the bottom of the trilateral city-states. And if this is the first time you've heard this, look into it. Prove what I just said isn't true, and you're going to find out that it is fucking true. Now kick yourself in the ass. Moreover, pull your head out of your asshole. This information's available to you. Why don't good people who consider themselves patriots know this shit? It's a very good question. But the same logic behind what I just said applies to everything I rattled off in this fucking video. So what I said is, first of all, we don't live on a wandering star. And I think I just said, yeah, it's based on the guy that said planet stuff. Earth is an element, although most Muppets assume they live on the flat Earth or the physics-defying globe theory. Both of which are our master's outlines, spoon-fed to the masses to mislead them. In the event that you squeal, why would they lie? And I meant to put that in quotes, but fuck it. You can't use either of those as a tool. Either of the outlines as a tool, mind you. Because they do not reflect reality as a whole. Again, look into this. Try using the fucking, heliocentric model as a fucking tool. And I'm not saying jerk yourself off and repeat what everybody else says. Try using it as a fucking tool across the board, across any subject you could possibly think of, and you can't do it. Try using the fucking ridiculous flat earth, the pseudo-intellectual flat earth, as a fucking tool. And do the same thing. Apply it to any given subject that you've ever heard of. And try to connect those dots. If it reflects reality, it's going to be interconnected, and this should apply to the globe or the flat earth, and or both, since that's what's being shopped around. You're going to find bits and pieces, possibly. They're going to be corrupted. They're going to be upside down, backwards, and drugged through the fucking mud. They're going to have some shit on them. And in some cases, they're going to be encased in shit. And or just be shit. And again, I'm referring to the globe theory and the flat earth model. They're both garbage. And people would know this if they looked into shit a long time ago. In other words, people who are older than myself and people who are my age and probably another 10 years after that, roughly, is probably the benchmark in terms of people who had access to some of this information when it was circulated and it was readily available on the internet. The golden age of the internet's over. That's something else people should have figured out, but people haven't because they're dumb. That goes back to what I began this with, if I do this right. Just how our masters are locking things down, how social engineering is alive and well, and it comes from the Tavistock Institute, which would come up all the time when you hear people bashing the alphabet community. But you don't hear them talking about the Tavistock Institute, because people are shopping around superficial fluff, which is why you and I still have access to the DARPA internet. We don't pose a threat to our masters, and people are terribly dumb. I left off on here, didn't I? So let's see. You can't use these things as a tool. This doesn't come up because the truth community is a circle jerk, and people haven't figured that out. That's also funded at its core. It has been, and it was, and it continues to be by the Rockefeller Trust, which means you can't trust it. Quote-unquote space is a bad pun. You don't hear that come up. You hear the flat earth kids saying, space doesn't exist. Space does exist, just not in the wishy-washy, stupid fucking way that you've been taught to, think in terms of it. You've been trained to repeat. And the same applies to what the flat earth kids were trained to repeat in terms of refuting it. They didn't think about it long enough to understand it. Instead, they just threw the whole fucking thing out. It's very similar to saying gravity doesn't exist, and gravity does not exist. Gravitons have never been fucking observed. But there is a force. There is an equal and opposite force. Why you and I, when we jump, we come back down to this rock. Some people in the flat earth community were spoon-fed buoyancy and density. And yes, those are things that do reflect reality. Those you can, rule out or reason out, based on replicable evidence-based research, actual science, what science should have stood for and hasn't. It's kind of like punk. Punk was done in less than a week. The same applies to what people think of as science. And now it's trust the science and believe in the bullshit, blah, blah, blah. Repeat what your neighbor says, or else comply. It's just as good as obey. Where are we at? I said space is a bad pun, and these two Zionist puppets are reaffirming the adult fairy tales through some dry comedy. So the other guy you're going to know in here And what wrote me in is it said, Stephen Fry exposes real reason Musk and Bezos are trying to get to Mars. Now, I've told you something in this video. I told you guys a lot of things in this video, and most of you probably can't connect the dots with why I jumped in here and why I wanted to hear what these Muppets had to say. What's the other guy's name? John Cleese is in here. And the way they kick this all off, because I'm not going to play the entire thing. You could look this shit up. They kick this off by saying that there's a work ethic in America. And in many ways, it's largely still Puritan. And then they use an analogy having to do with smoking. They talk about how non-smokers will go after smokers, with a rabid furiosity. These aren't the words they use. I'm paraphrasing, mind you. But essentially, the work ethic in America boils down to being, at its core, still very Puritan. The Puritans that came over here and raped and murdered the indigenous people. And, 13 colonies and all that stuff. Yeah, you still with me? Here we go.
To get into space on their own rocket.
Well, they follow a branch of philosophy that is not very academically fashionable or admired, which is objectivism, which is the philosophy of Ayn Rand. The sort of libertarian philosophy of the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, which are more popular now than in our own time. Peter Thiel, for example, who's a very powerful investor in all kinds of things, he's a great admirer of Ayn Rand. And there's a new philosophy called long-termism, which sounds rather admirable. We've always thought bad thing about politics is so short-term. But this is a totally different thing. This regards the future of humanity in hundreds, or if not thousands of years, is the most important thing we can think about. And a few...
Sidebar. Earlier, Stephen Fry was talking about retiring in terms of the work ethic. And he said the last thing he would want to do is garden. He would rather eat his legs. I feel the same way about reading Ayn Rand. That fucking crap is garbage for pseudo-intellectuals. Trite fucking garbage. Long-winded garbage. Often praised by pseudo-intellectuals. I was listening to a gal talk about some tarot stuff last night, and then she bled into, well, maybe I won't talk about that one, but what was the other one? Then she started talking about how she came from an anthropology background, so I was like, here we go, because typically speaking, what you're going to hear these kids praise in terms of anthropology, and what I'm dressing up real fast, is also how history's been corrupted in a number of ways, and how you and I function has been corrupted in a number of ways. She started praising, what's his fucking name? Darwin. And she said that she used to have a copy of his book, but then she gave it away, and she was torn up that she gave away the book. Now, what she didn't mention, what she failed to mention, is the full title of that book has to do with eugenics. And it was purposely truncated because it's fascist shit. It's racist shit. Back to point. Darwin, most of his family promoted eugenics. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't understand this connection with eugenics. To connect that with what I was talking about earlier, I mentioned the Tavistock Institute is intimately connected with the alphabet community. I mentioned that you and I are being manipulated in terms of social engineering campaigns. I pointed out that words are being truncated and we're having smaller and smaller boxes to leave thoughtful comments on the internet, even though we're supposed to be connected and we're supposed to be able to communicate with one another. Would you agree? It's quite the opposite. So what I was going to say is the alphabet community is connected with the Tavistock Institute and intimately connected with the eugenics agenda. In other words, shitting out bargain bin kids means that our masters who do not corrupt their DNA and do not fall into all these traps because they are the ones perpetrating these traps will by all rights stand apart from all of the people who do corrupt their DNA, which means that they will be superior in terms of their generations. Nudge, nudge, something, something. And this does not come up. So back to Darwin before I dip back into this bullshit again. Darwin, and this does not come up. It should come up. It's information that's available to you. It flies in the face of all the Darwinism. Darwin stole his working concepts from a dying man in a tent. And I urge you to try to figure out what the name of that gentleman is who was dying in a tent. The working concepts that I'm referring to, do not apply to what people call evolution, because evolution is pseudoscience at its best. At its fucking best. I mean, you don't see living creatures turning into other creatures. I'm sure as shit not going to watch my guitar turn into a chair. You know what I mean? That's not the best example with the inanimate objects. But you do not see a chicken turn into a horse. That's not how shit works. And it's never going to be how shit works. But now people will talk about when they were younger and then they grew up, how they evolved into something else. They're using the jargon, which is social engineering jargon, again, circulated, perpetuated by the Tavistock Institute. It's in place to fuck us up. The same applies to planets. Planets don't exist and they never will. The etymology relates to a wandering star. This is shit people should know. And the further away you get from the origin of what something means, the more likely that it is it's going to be corrupted, you're going to be misled, and people are going to end up talking about shit that doesn't reflect reality. Think about the alphabet community for a second. How many people do you know now that will urge you to believe, to assume, and to repeat that there's no difference between men and women? And that a man can become a woman, and a woman can become a man. Whether you're taking, big pharma infusions of, testosterone or estrogen, you're a big pharma slave because you consented to doing so. Doesn't change the fact. There's XX and there's XY. Even hermaphrodites, when they're born, are born with one working genitalia, typically speaking, because it's a binary system and there's nothing but proof. Hot and cold, 9 days, sunrise, sunset, etc., etc., etc. Magnetism and electricity. It's a big fucking deal. Well, people don't understand these things anymore because they've been corrupted. Back to point. That was my sidebar, my tangent cam, as always.
Well, that's a few pandemics and diseases and climate change are pinpricks in
man-made, well, people call them plan-demics now, but climate change is also man-made and it's related to HAARP. But you don't hear people talking about that as often as they used to. It's similar to what I was saying about trying to find, it's called the Learning Against Learning campaign. It dates back to the 16th century. And that's where we got the flat earth and the globe theory, essentially. And you don't hear people talking about that. Because people who were my age apparently didn't take the fucking time and or gave a shit. And or bothering leaving things on the internet and being censored these days. Because again, the benchmark, the golden age of the internet is long since dead. And people don't care. If I type up what I typed up in here, most people aren't going to read this. Because it's not truncated. Because it's not pithy. You do see some people in here typing some shit up. But I bet you 10 to 1 if you read these, which I'm not bothering with at the moment, they're probably praising this shit. There's some social engineering stickers. I was waiting for them to pop up. Yeah, there aren't as many in here, which is encouraging on that note. But the context of this is absolute pseudoscience.
the long history. After all, the Ice Age wiped most of us out, but it gave a small cadre of surviving humans the chance to become our ancestors.
Allegedly.
And they think very hard about that. And there's a lot of paranoid fear that's why, Musk and Bezos and people are wanting to go to Mars. They know the Earth is absolutely doomed. Because the image I have is we are children playing on the beach,
Yes.
making sandcastles,
Yeah.
with our back to the sea.
Yeah.
And on the sea, various currents are combining. They are, for example, bioaugmentation, brain-machine interfacing, which is something Elon Musk is doing, where you interface with a computer and a computer with you, so it reads your thoughts and you can control it with your mind, if you like. Robotics itself, quantum computing, and artificial intelligence of different kinds.
And none of that would exist if you and I were doing the right thing, which goes back to what I was saying about for the people, by the people. All of those are agendas to subjugate us. All of those are bigger agendas having to do with things that people do not fucking fathom. They do not have the slightest clue about. Which is why they promote AI, why they support digital coin, why they do all kinds of stupid fucking shit. It's why they train the AI. Granted, all of us are doing that using the internet now because we've been manipulated and people just don't fucking care. I usually say complacency got us this far. I'm almost done with this, I suppose.
New materials, nanomaterials, and so on. All of these technologies, which are transformative on their own, not to mention genomics and gene editing, are like separate swells in the ocean that are combining to make a gigantic tsunami. And as I say, we are playing on the beach, wondering about little things, you know, like this particular strike, or what names we call ourselves, or what our identities are. There are these tiny little issues that we are obsessed
So what's the
with.
tsunami?
The tsunami is the combination, the confluence of all these technologies, all changing each other.
So you mean life will be transformed in a way we can't begin to guess at?
Yes.
Now, was that lesser magic? Because that does lead into where this is going. Merging man with machine. I shit you not, and doing away with free will. But people do not see the forest for the trees. The tsunami analogy does apply, despite all the other fucking rot that these two fucking reaffirmed and misled people with. Which is deplorable. And maybe they're just stupid fucking actors and they don't realize it. Maybe. It is possible. You know, celebrity puppets. What the fuck do I know?